You have to stay unmuted.
Okay, so nobody's getting the truth from the mainstream media, folks. It's well past time to open your eyes, your ears, and your mind. Do your own research because something isn't right here. And if you can't see that, you are not paying attention, folks.
It's the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order. A world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations.
So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. Now that's back from high school algebra, but let's take a look. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
The important message that we need Australians to get vaccinated as quickly as possible. In line with that, I do encourage all Australians to please go and book your vaccinations as soon as you can if you haven't already done so.
Emma, get away!
When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
Okay, we need to stand up against this tyranny, folks. Stop giving away your freedoms and liberties because the more you give up, the more these people will take until you have absolutely nothing left. That's their agenda. All right, good evening, viewers. We're out and into the stratosphere. SG's with us. Sorry for the hiccups, guys. Just a few hold-ups. We're in a war. We all know that. And what a war it is, guys. And that's a bit of what we're going to discuss today, where we are, what's going on. We're watching bridges getting taken out. You know what I mean? We're watching everything go down around the world. The deep state's in panic. We're doing a magnificent job, and I think SG will agree with that when we bring him in. But guys, I put out a little live this morning. I got questions in there. I got a whole book full of stuff that we can talk to SG about. So I think we just get him straight in here and get going. Because we've got a little bit to cover, and SG loves to give a very thorough answer, and that's what we like about it, guys. That we do get into the nitty gritty and we find out what's going on. So SG, welcome back again, mate. Apologies from Bose. He couldn't get here today. He's got a few things on, but great to have you back again, bro.
It's good to be here, my friend. Thanks for having me.
Okay, well, look, let's just sorry, we got something going in the background there. Let's just get straight into it. Number one, Germany. Let's just go there for a minute, SG, and then we'll move into what we were just talking about pre-screen. Germany has now put out that the C-19 is a hoax. Will this replicate, and will other countries start to get this word out like Germany is getting it out now? Can you see this in the future? It's pretty big news, I think, SG.
It absolutely is big news, and we're going to see that and much more. You know, quite a long time ago, my late mentor and I had a discussion guru where he said to me that before this process is over, it's very likely that we're going to make the mainstream media and the governments of the NATO West tell the truth on themselves. In other words, they're going to admit to advanced knowledge of questionable science behind everything related to the pandemic. They're going to admit to questionable financial entanglement. It's going to be open sourced out in the public record through a lot of different avenues, but court cases, I think, are certainly playing into that as we've been watching in this process, the various factions and the levers and the mechanisms that made these sorts of things possible, that made this geopolitical destabilization of the world and the launch of a depopulation agenda possible. Now, that being said, this is also setting up something very, very crucial for the consciousness of mankind, which is what Russia has been banging the drums all about since they first went into Ukraine. And that particular drum is that the entirety of the pandemic architecture around the world, and especially as it pertained to the C-19 virus, all of that was done with the knowledge of and at the request of U.S. intelligence community agencies, the U.S. Democrat National Convention, and bureaucrats and oligarchs within the U.S. government, to include familiar names like Hillary Clinton, Hussein Obama, Victoria Nuland, and others. So we have Russia that has been banging that drum for a while. They've brought it to the UN Security Council a couple of times. It's certainly been reported on by citizen and alt media journalists all over the world, the things that the Russian Chemical and Biological Warfare's division of their army claims to have unearthed in Ukraine. But now we have the first stage of admission of something along those flavors. In other words, that it was a manufactured hoax from a NATO member government. And so this is going to represent a schism in NATO, which will eventually drive the alliance apart. And that schism is not just happening around bioweapons. It's happening around all of the major events, the major violations of human rights that we've all observed over certainly the last 3 to 5 years, but you can make the case going back to the mid 20th century. But the biological weapons component and COVID-19 sort of opening that doorway or opening that gateway, if you want to call it that, to that broader discussion, that's absolutely going to shred the NATO alliance. It's also going to shred the validity of NATO governments. And so we're already seeing some of this playing out in its early flavors in France, in Italy, certainly in Germany at this point. Poland has become increasingly authoritarian with the steel of their most recent election, which reflects the sentiment, of course, of the Polish people in the opposite direction. It's an inverse correlation. So this is a catalyzing, it's a galvanizing moment here in the world. And we're witnessing, desperation maneuvers beginning to play off from those very actors that we've discussed would be deploying desperation maneuvers for a long time. We've known that the Western intelligence communities, for example, have sought to unseat, to destabilize the unity of the public bloc of Russia, the population ad hoc at large within Russia. They executed on that plan on the 22nd of March in a spectacular fashion, and more incidents, I think, are to be expected within Russia. And it's worth noting, Guru, just in this process, that for the last 2 years, Russia has endured nearly 24 hours a day terrorist attacks in the southwest of their country, in the region of Kursk and just south along the Donbass region of Ukraine, the autonomous region. There have been terrorist attacks nearly every day since the Ukrainian war began, and even before that. So this is not a small penalty that any one of us, we the people, have paid anywhere. We have been paying and paid dearly for the process that we're going through. But the joy part of it, I think, Guru, comes in the fact that because the entire world is aware now and is beginning to become more and more precisely keen on the things that are occurring, and of the fact that there is a manipulation, a coordinated usurpation of power that's happening around the world, this process can only lead to one direction, and that is the inevitable end of the current construct.
So, yeah, look, the MSM, Fox News, do you think they're going to be the catalyst that will be opening this stuff up to us at SG? Do you see when the other big guys, like we've seen some funny stuff from the Murdoch papers and stuff like that, starting to give us a little bit. But how far into the mainstream do we need to go to actually reach the people? Is Fox News going to be enough, or will it be a takeover of the lot? And when do you see that, maybe?
I think it's going to be a takeover of the lot, quite frankly. And I think we're already seeing that process playing out. Fox News is increasingly giving their commentators and hosts more latitude regarding things like the 2020 election, the war in Ukraine, and discussion of what we would consider sort of fringe topics out there that don't go with the pushed public narrative from the pulpits of government. We also have financial control established vis-a-vis a gentleman named John Malone over at CNN. And John Malone is a good friend of President Trump's, billionaire buddies. They've known one another a long time. And so the the hegemony of mainstream media is already lost. But to the essence of your question, which is how much of the mainstream media do we need to convert in this process in order to ensure continuity of consciousness, I would say that about the same, estimate I think would apply, somewhere between 7.5 to 9 in 10 people. So about 75 to 90% of people, so 75 to 90% of media sources should be discussing a flavor of the same topic so that people can arrive at the critical analysis conclusion that they have to arrive at, which of course is inevitable when you have the group adding context, content, depth, a much broader discussion to be had, which adds to understanding just all the more. So I would say in this process, it's very likely you're going to see most of the major legacy media outlets begin telling flavors of the truth, but I don't think you will see any of them tell the entirety of the truth all of the way through to the end of the process. Because I think that one of the things you're going to see that we are going to collectively witness as a humanity, as a civilization, when we get to the point of accountability for COVID-19, accountability for the coordinated election theft going on in all of the NATO bloc countries and all of what you would call the global north countries. By the time we arrive at that particular point, the media will be complicit in crimes against humanity and crimes against civilization, and here in the United States against the Constitution, which of course is treason, seditious conspiracy, and violation of Geneva and the Genocide Convention. And I think you're going to see at least a couple of well-known, well-respected talking heads in those legacy media spaces be held to military justice publicly.
Cool. Yeah, that's what we want to see, isn't it? We all want to see it. Okay, there's whispers, and we're getting whispers over here, SG. I'm going to go through a few questions here, mate. We've got a few. Righto, there's whispers of, in, what was it, darling? June?
June.
Yeah, June, that B&Bs have been put on notice, and we're hearing that that's been in America as well as here in Australia, about business, and there'll be no accommodation for a period of time. SG, have you heard those rumblings that and and then the next question that people are going to ask me is, do we see a black hat, you know what I mean, with the white hats coming in on the back of it, or do we just see the military coming in if this was to happen in June and July and Airbnbs have been put on notice? And yeah, what do you know about that topic?
You know, it's funny that you bring that up because it's one of the topics I was going to try and hit on today in our discussion. You know, these corporate entities that make money primarily off of the business of travel have a very vested interest in keeping the pulse, minute by minute, day by day, every day about the travel situation and about the concerns, if any, that they should have regarding the free flow of travel. And so the fact that they're putting out a bulletin this far ahead, I think it was put out around the 1st of April regarding travel post-June, specifically here in the United States, June 6th of 2024 onward, which is the 80th anniversary of D-Day at Normandy in the Second World War. I find it very fascinating that the bulletin is being put out and it deals with government travel restrictions. I've been talking for a long time and have taken a considerable amount of heat on the audio files regarding this Plandemic 2.0 reattempt event. And I'm still anticipating that such an event is going to happen. And I'm anticipating, Guru, that it's going to happen within the Paris Olympics, which I believe is late June, early July of 2024. And it's remarkable to me that France has asked 45 countries to supply military and law enforcement capacity to this event, citing concerns about, everything from climate to escalated tensions in the world. You name it, it's there. So, we have this particular Olympic event occurring in the midsummer. We have now a B&B restriction advisory issued regarding possible government travel restrictions or local weather events, I think was the other major highlight within that bulletin. They're talking about essentially the same period of time. President Trump has discussed the idea of an economic crash here in the United States of America. That seems it seems very relevant along in this process. We do have to essentially decimate the U.S. dollar at that surface level capacity in order to disempower all of the bloodlines for the crime syndicates worldwide. You're talking about the crime underbelly of the entire world being financed by the U.S. dollar and the prevalence and power that currency exerts. at the same time, you're seeing these geopolitical shifts happening. And I think significant shifts are going to come within the midsummer, right around these same periods of time, perhaps just slightly before, regarding the Chinese campaign in the Pacific region and the escalation of tensions in Russia. I reported not that long ago that Russia was likely going to open up a second front within the Ukrainian eastern countryside, just east of Kiev. They, of course, have Russian-aligned forces in Belarus just across the border, immediately north of Kiev. But it seems much more strategic that the Russians would also open a larger front, essentially to force the Ukrainian armed forces into a three front position that they're not able to field. And I think we're looking at the expansion of that coming midsummer, and we now have Russian military instituting an entire information blackout in the southwest regions of the country, right across the border from a Ukrainian metro called Sumy or Sumy. And this information blackout has now been running for about 14 days straight. Nothing has come out of that region. Nothing's allowed to come out of that region, which tells me that a significant amount of military activity must be happening there. And it's worth noting that area, Sumy or Sumy, is just about a half a day's drive if you were to get along at a 55 to 60 kilometers an hour clip from the capital of Ukraine, Kiev itself. So this is a significant move that could be coming, and Russia has timed their conscription goals to align with the early summer, excuse me, which would be about 4 to 6 weeks prior to these events that we were just describing a moment ago. So this is an incredible time. And when you look at things like the Airbnb bulletin, if you don't have this sort of context and backdrop for understanding, it's very annoying to see something like that, perhaps even discouraging. But when you understand what may be happening and what may be at play here in the world, and you have these organizations that literally base their existence on being able to keep the pulse of these types of events worldwide, it's looking as though we're having an incredible picture shaping up that is going to essentially amount, I think, Guru, to a gauntlet for humanity. But on the other side is true freedom.
Yeah, well, they don't want to let us get to this election in your country, that's for sure, SG. But yeah, a couple of things there. 45 countries lining with France. Funny number, that one, isn't it? I do believe that we'll see Russia go back to the old days of the states all coming in under one Republic of Russia or whatever it may be. Yeah, all of them. They'll come back. This is just a battle between evil that's got to be fought, guys, to create the exposure and get things back to where they can be controlled and not controlled for our detriment, but maybe controlled for the benefit of mankind instead of the benefit of the elites. But while we're talking about France, we have the French soldiers for the first time in history have turned up at Buckingham Palace. What can you read into that? We got Germany standing up, a NATO country, saying COVID was a scam. We know that the French have got a little bit to do with things, and here they are stepping into England. So what do you think that move's about, SG?
My friend, that's actually one of the topics that I just had not had the chance and time to research yet, but I find it compelling and fascinating given the symbolism, and it ties into all of the symbolism we've seen happening around Buckingham Palace over these last many months and years, right? We've seen everything going back to 2018 and the Queen, to the event of the Grim Reaper on the supposed coronation day, the disappearance of the royal family, multiple reports out of England at different points all along the way citing that Buckingham Palace is empty and has been empty for a long time. So seeing the French government and French military forces in particular being involved in England, and especially at this critical, pivotal time in history for NATO, this pivotal time for the bureaucratic hegemony at the top versus their we the people populations within each nation state. I mean, honestly, Guru, this reeks of being planned. I just haven't had time to research it any further.
Yeah, no, that's all right, mate. Yeah, look, we got people in England that are, giving us a few little comments and looking into it here and there. So again, the smoke's got to settle, SG, you know what I mean, till we get the info out, know what's correct and what's not correct. And so let's just go to your border for a minute, because Abbott has said down there that they're going to go into war with the cartel, and drones are going to come into play. SG, do you have a quick comment on that one, mate?
I think my only comment would be to highlight the federal government versus states' rights issue that's being put on display here. But I don't think that you're going to see disinvolvement in any sort of capacity, or disinterest, maybe is a better way to put it, from the U.S. Air Force, because you're talking about the airspace over the border. And that airspace has been very heavily monitored through all sorts of airborne platforms, from electronic intelligence to warfare capability, and raw gunship capability for essentially 3 to 4 years flat at this point. So, with the actions of the Abbott administration, and it's worth highlighting that I don't necessarily endorse Abbott. I don't criticize either, but I'm not convinced enough, as based on the behavior that I've seen and the time frames that I've seen it happening in, that Governor Abbott is a true we the people patriot. However, I will say that Governor Abbott's example that he's sort of putting out there right now is in alignment with the symbolism of Texas to the United States of America, specifically the Republic of Texas as an independent entity all its own. And I think that's part of what you're seeing here played out, is the Texas government is increasingly acting with greater autonomy, because it was initially a separate nation aligned with the United States of America, and acquiesced to the greater whole of the Union, but kept within its state constitution that it could lawfully secede and support itself as a separate republic once again. So I think what you're seeing is sovereignty being played out here in some form or fashion. Military involvement is almost certainly happening, especially with the National Guard being involved at places like Eagle Pass. And the airspace, of course, above the border would be military jurisdiction, because that's a national security interest, obviously. So I think what we have here, more than anything else, is the vector for a much more expanded discussion about the border, a much more expanded discussion about what the military should be doing, why the military is not currently doing the things that it should be doing, which we know is not necessarily true when we consider the shadow and background operations. But we have a great majority of the American population, and I think a lot of the population of the NATO Western world, that is only partially awake, and those that are partially awake still are wondering why the military forces of their respective nations have not publicly intervened in what is becoming much more prominent and much more obvious election fraud.
Okay, yeah, where was Abbott in the last 4 years? This is what, I had a bit to do with me and Bosie, Rick, actually spoke to the American people down at Eagle Pass there on a live at the border that last month ago or something, SG. And it was funny how it was just after that, you know what I mean, that they realised, I think, that the Patriots were serious, and that Abbott was pushed into making some decisions, I think, because, as I say, where were they before this? And this is, I think, a bit the same as you, SG, a lot of us have been here, stamping the word out for a long time, but these people's in position of power only seem to come to play when they have to come to play by the demand of the people. And what's that for? To save votes, save credibility, keep their money. So, yeah, I think it's very interesting on what's going on down there. But let's get to something that is probably you're going to know a fair bit about, SG, and a lot of people are talking about. I'm not too really worried about it. I look at it that if the Lord's lined up the planets this way, and you know what I mean, this is what's going to go down. I think it's a good thing. I think it's a frequency thing. I think the deep state's trying to make something bad out of it. Will they try and pull a stunt on the American people if they get out in numbers to congregate at this event? I do believe that they probably would if I take them to past history. So what is your comment on the actual eclipse, 2 days time for you Americans? And what's the vibe? Is it a frequency? Is there a frequency change coming during the eclipse? What do you think, is about to happen here? It's biblical, but how is it biblical from your perspective, SG? Without stamping you to a religious, holding you to a biblical thought there, obviously.
Well, it's fascinating. This particular celestial event occurring on the 8th of April. We've seen a number of significant events occurring on the eighth days of the months as we've gone through this process. Mar-a-Lago was raided on the 8th of August. Maui was attacked by DEW on the 8th of August. So we have April the 8th coming up. And what is so incredible about this eclipse, Guru, is that it has a number of symbolic connections to ages past, solar cycles that we have evidence of in the days of old, and of course the call over from the Nineveh, the towns of Nineveh here in North America, and the Nineveh of old in the Levant, in the ancient empire of Assyria. But it also deals with the sun itself, which the sun, of course, is exercised as one of the deities of this dark occultic religion. It goes back to the days of ancient Egypt and even before that. And the sun itself, I personally believe to be, when it's in balance with creation, it's a life-giving, passionate energy. It's a purifying energy. So I would consider purification or trial by fire, refinement by fire, as a symbol as well in this process. Gemstones are purified through fire. So in this particular eclipse, we of course have it entering America at Eagle Pass, which is symbolically connected to the border. It will transit over the North American face on the planet, southwest to northeast. It will trek over 7 towns named Nineveh here in the United States of America and exit into Nova Scotia, Canada, where it will hit the only town in Canada named Nineveh as well as it exits out of this particular continent. The eclipse itself is sort of reminiscent of the story of Jonah because of the connection to Nineveh. And there's a good school of thought that would suggest that sometime during the reign of King Jeroboam II, a solar eclipse, which occurred in June, I believe, of 763, I think it was BC, would have been visible in the skies over ancient Assyria, and that would have harbingered in those days a changing of the guard at the royal palace level. In other words, this would have been seen as a judgment. This would have been seen as an interference by creation and the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, if we can use that terminology, over and above the pagan deities, because this was an exercise, of course, of darkening the sun. So the same, I think, is true here. But what is so fascinating, Guru, about this particular celestial event that we have coming up is the fact that it is essentially spawning off a preemptive streak of chaos that sort of has everybody's attention. And you have a lot of the patriots, even the awakened patriots, looking at the world and looking at the public narrative space and wondering why that amount of attention is being brought to this particular issue. States of emergency being preemptively declared in places in Canada and Europe and in the United States. School systems and colleges canceling classes. Workplaces giving paid time off. Factories giving paid time off for this particular event. We also have whistleblower reports to suggest that components of the U.S. inactive ready reserve have been issued activation orders by the Pentagon quietly in alignment with Executive Order 13223, which was an executive order issued by the George W. Bush administration in September of 2001, which was one of the first orders to put the United States into a wartime footing pertaining to terrorism. We have a public travel advisory, a large gathering travel advisory issued now by the intelligence community, citing concerts, stadiums, and houses of worship, and to avoid these places and large gatherings on the day of the eclipse. And these concerns were given in the public narrative space to be drawn back to things like ISIS, which sort of has the exact same, almost identical flavor to the same type of heads up that was given by the U.S. Embassy in Moscow on the 7th of March, which seemed to harbinger the exact event of 22 March, 15 days later. So, this particular celestial event, Guru, for whatever reason, I think that you have forces of darkness, forces of self-interested agendas that are seeking to maximize whatever effect they can draw esoterically from this particular event. And I think you have God-focused patriots and spirit-centered patriots that are seeking to amplify those Holy Spirit energies, those purification energies, which come through something like a solar eclipse. So there's this, it's a literal spiritual back and forth. It's a seesaw effect between the forces of good and evil in the world. And the eclipse, I think, presents an opportunity for sort of like an injection of ether into an engine. You get a tremendous amount of immediate response, but then the engine must eventually return back to its normality. So this is a very interesting time. I'm fascinated to see what events may be in store. The Simpsons actually predicted this event in one of their 1995 episodes, and their track record seems to be very, very good on it. So
it's pretty all right, isn't it? Well, I got a newspaper article sitting right here in front of me, the Sunday Journal. Okay, millions see eclipse. Next showing in 2024. This was produced on the 8th of April, in March 1970. And it predicted to the day, the 8th of April, 2024, 1970. So tell me they don't know what's going on out there. Yeah, they know everything. So yeah, that's 1970, predicted it to the day. So amazing, mate.
Incredible. The statistical odds of that, my friend. I think that's worth
exactly.
highlighting.
Yeah, I'll send you that one over, mate. Okay. Hang on, let's just have a look, because we got a few questions, and I wanted, because it's just me or me, SG, I wanted to get through the people's questions, mate. It's about them, not me, so that's how we try to make it. Okay, we've got military here in Australia. We've got Operation Steadfast. Is it an exercise or is it a clean-up? People are asking those sort of questions. So what would you know? We do have tanks. We've had a heap of Yank soldiers turn up here. I got the word about a month ago that a bloke of Asian descent and an American actually were met at one of the bases up here in South Queensland by someone I know, and they were pretty happy about being here to be a part of Australia's history, SG. And I thought that was a really good comment to hear. They've been very quiet up there on the bases. They don't say much about anything, but then they did come out and have that comment. So what do you think's happening? Is this does this look like, I'm not going to ask you if it is, but does this look like the advancement of the alliance that we needed to see around the world coming to this time?
Absolutely, it does. And it treks with advancement operations that have happened in Cyprus, North Africa, specifically Egypt, the Norwegian countryside, Finland not that long ago. I believe Iceland was involved in these exercises within the last 6 months. So these are preemptive staging exercises, I believe, Guru, after sort of analyzing these longitudinally. And I think the staging could be anything from troop and equipment movement to refinement capability to surveillance expansion, all sorts of capabilities being moved around. And of course, legitimate military cargoes and government, and people's possessions, things like vast amounts of gold and gemstones, oil reserves that have been wrongfully removed, things of this nature. So what's occurring in Australia, I would say, is very much along the same flavor, right? We've got a tremendous amount of action in the South Pacific. We have a number of U.S. military planes in and out almost daily at this point from the Marshall Islands, the Guam area, the Marianas Islands. And so, and all of this against the backdrop, of course, of a recent earthquake in Taiwan and the Chinese military essentially exerting, near total control over the Taiwanese airspace and frequently pushing into the Taiwanese waterways. So we're seeing preparation for something. There is absolutely something coming. What that something might be, I think all of us could get flavors of, but being able to isolate it specifically is nigh impossible. And I'm almost glad that we're not able to, because if we can, so can our enemies. But in this particular process, one of the things that is happening is a multilateral international coalition of forces, coalition of militaries, some of them compartmentalized, some of them much more broad reaching in their scope of force. And they are essentially setting up a failure to start for the black hat military industrial complex that remains in the world. And we do have some of that. We have some of that in the form of advisors to entities like the Atlantic Council, advisors to entities like Ability One and the Presidential Commission for that. I highlighted that not that long ago regarding the attack in Baltimore, in the port of Baltimore here in the USA on 3/26. So there are military warlords and military industrial profiteers that still have yet to be drawn out. They exist in all of the defense contracting communities, most of the intelligence communities in the NATO Western world, certainly in our main regular forces at the top echelons of command and control. But in that process of exposure, we're also seeing a setup to accomplish a number of different things, right? Drag them out into the open, paralyze and stop the system, allow for territorial transition if any of that needs to occur, allow for resource transition and transfer, destruction of underground tunnel systems and island systems, specifically island trafficking chains, which are very prominent in the South Pacific and in the west of the African, off of the coast in West Africa near the Azores. So these types of things, it's very interesting to me that that's happening now. We've had simultaneous operations with multinational coalition forces in the Mediterranean, Europe, even in South America not that long ago with training exercises in the Caribbean, and seeing these exercises happening in Australia, coupled with the report that you shared about people being there to be part of Australia's history, I would say that we're setting up the same sorts of events that we've been seeing set up in Europe and in North America now for the last few years.
No worries. Okay, so we've heard that that the military's and you mentioned Antarctica there. We might try and cover two in one here. We've heard that the military is pulling HARP down. Now I've seen that out there. I can't vet it or anything, SG. That and Antarctica. So let's just go Antarctica for a minute. You know, the mistake, so-called mistake at Auckland, you know, where they supposedly fired their machinery or whatever you want to call it, and actually hit Christchurch when it was meant to hit out in the ocean. So anything on Antarctica, and is the military pulling HARP down as we have heard in rumours?
I think the answer to that for sure is yes, but pulling it down is almost too broad of a summary term. I think what you've got is an active war being waged in the secret space technology community, and some of those weapons of war are being repurposed and captured. Some of them are being destroyed. All of them, excuse me, have to be reconnoitered and targeted, which is a main process in this, or a main part of this process that we've all been going through. And Antarctica is going to, I think, come to the fore in a very big way pretty soon. We have Iran, specifically the Iranian military, which is separate from the Iranian Quds Force, discussing that they're going to set up a military expedition and permanent operations in Antarctica. This, of course, would violate the Antarctic Treaty, which, you know, you can get all of the Western world nations, Guru, to agree on the Antarctic Treaty, but they can't agree on a shoe size measurement or anything else beyond that. So that alone, I think, should tell everyone that whatever is in Antarctica, or whatever Antarctica happens to hold as far as the key to a further mass awakening of the peoples of the world, this is a very, very significant part of this journey. And so we now have pressure being put on that. What's also very incredible is that the Antarctic shelf has been used for a tremendous amount of storage of pathogens, biological agents, and essentially all manner of paraphernalia that are illegal by international law, partly because of the temperature, which allows preservation of bioorganic material, but also because there's virtually no oversight capability within the U.S. government and within the U.S. military, intelligence, and industrial complex to really see the types of research and the types of things, weaponry, secret projects, etc., that are being stored and expounded upon in Antarctica. And of course, there's triple net NDAs that are signed by all involved. So whistleblower reporting up to the time that we are currently living in now has been nigh impossible. So in this particular journey, Australia, I think you all are going to be very pivotal, frankly, due to proximity. And so how that plays out, I'm not really, qualified to offer a speculation, because I just think it would be too broad, and I don't think that that's doing justice to anyone down there, especially in your neck of the woods. However, the fact that the U.S. military is on site, I've seen the French and German military in Australian airspace and in Australian waterways. Recently, I've seen the Italian military in the Pacific region recently. The Indonesians are increasingly more cooperative, it seems like. If I'm not mistaken, they're sort of like your all's northwest neighbors. So in this particular process, the level of cooperation militarily in that area of the woods, outside of the DUMBs, which is something that affects all of us everywhere, I really do think that a major component of the awakening that's going to get brought to the fore through the Australian people is going to be what has been happening in Antarctica over these last many decades.
Okay, well, yeah, we're all looking forward to. We know what's down at Constitution Dock. Everything down there, and that whole dock in Tasmania there is CSIRO or CSIRO, initiated, or companies that feed them to actually, look after stuff in Antarctica. But as you say, yeah, until we do something, obviously Russia's, took their part out of it. The agreement. I'm sure that they did that a little while ago from memory. Iran now saying something about it as well. So, yeah, maybe we might get a disclosure down there soon, guys. Who knows? But Australia has had a lot to do with it. So, okay, the 3 rockets that are going up at 30-minute intervals before the eclipse, what's your perception on what they're doing there, SG?
Another Simpsons prediction, actually. So firing rockets at the solar eclipse occurred in a Simpsons episode, and the rockets missed the eclipse and fell on a bridge, of all things, which I find
I didn't know that one. Okay, yeah.
I find it absolutely fascinating, the correlations to the present day and time, right? Certain entities online would ask if we believe in coincidences. So with the rockets and the pursuit of the three rockets, or the three prongs of the trident, considering that NASA is a fundamentally satanic agency being shot out at the eclipse itself, I'm not sure what target they're hoping they will hit. If they're planning on striking, any sort of celestial object, if they're planning on sending those rockets up into what we would call, or what I call, the high sky space of our Earth in existence. It's also known, I think, in circles as proliferated low Earth orbit. So to what end, I'm not certain, but I find the naming of the rocket systems, I believe they're APEP, APEP, which corresponds to an ancient pagan god of darkness. I find it very fascinating that those methods are being deployed at this time. And so that ties us back to sort of the discussion we were having a moment ago about this idea of dark forces in the world seeking to exploit this energy, just as light, love-based forces in the world are seeking to amplify this energy rather than exploit it for personal gain. And so there's a fundamental differential, I think, that's getting created in the spiritual space. This is going to be a spiritual event of some kind, Guru. We just don't know how kinetic, how real world transformative it may or may not be. This could be when we see something happen with the US dollar, which would be absolutely fascinating considering that we just started the financial new year. And prior to the 18th century, of course, the new year was actually celebrated on the 1st of April. So this is 7 days after the beginning of the new year. That's, God's perfect number, the number 7. We're literally hitting it. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the eclipse is coming up here. This is on a Monday. So that's literally after a 7-day cycle of Sunday to Monday, at the very beginning of the month. So whatever happens with this eclipse, and to whatever end I think that we're seeing both sides vying for, I choose to have a little bit of faith in those entities online that say patriots are in control in case the lights go out. And while I do believe that patriots are in control of key arenas, I also believe that purging of other arenas has been necessary along in this entire process. And it is simply my faith-based prayer that as we go through significant stressor events like the eclipse and other events that I think we have to look forward to over the summer, that we will see that purging process carried out much more fervently and to a much greater distance and to a greater expanse within those communities, so that by the time we arrive at that fall season, we're in a position to take back these levers of power.
Okay, so we've just had, looking glasses. Someone's just put a thing in looking glass with a question mark, but, looking glasses coming to where it's, what it done was it shot them in this direction. We're right where we are now, guys. All right, the lines crossed around this time. And, from there it was, the people had to wake up, and the people are waking up. So I do believe we're at the end of our looking glass, projections that they had there, because it doesn't seem to go too much past the point of, from what I know anyway, SG may want to correct me, but the point of that, the two lines merge and cross, and at the cross point is when humanity is actually going, hey, hang on, something's wrong here. So yeah, I do believe that we're coming to the end of that looking glass period that they had to look into. SG, you want to correct me on that, or do you agree?
I think we're coming into the end of a particular phase of that period. In my research with Project Looking Glass, we've got predictions going back to the 1980s and early 1990s, discussing events as late as 2035. But all of the predictions that are associated with consciousness, specifically the convergence of consciousness here in the world, seem to coalesce around 2023 to 2026. In that 3-year period of time. And so we're dead smack now in the middle of that 3-year period of time. It's fitting that we had Tucker Carlson have an individual on his show just recently, I think it was within the last 36 hours, who had written an article, a Substack actually, discussing what he termed the vibe shift. And that was he was drawing attention to the vibratory resonance shift that's happening around the world, where people are drawing attention to, previously stigmatized topics. They're increasingly willing to say things that were unspeakable just a couple of years ago. And so this this is sort of a credit and a testament to the veracity and the tenacity of patriots out there, because we have held the line. We have held the lighthouse torch of truth long enough that we are now seeing significant traction in large swaths of consciousness. Tucker Carlson has an audience that averages about 140 million on any given particular event or show that he does, between all of the various platforms that he's a part of, and then of course his content being reshared in what is an increasingly an increasingly connected digital information age. So that particular reality guru, the convergence of consciousness that we're living through right now, this drives the change. This drives the rebalance here in the world, which forces the chaotic, desperation, disastrous moves that will come from our deep state opponents, because we are sucking their energy. And I shouldn't necessarily even say that we're sucking their energy. We're simply reclaiming forces of our quantum ether, reclaiming forces of our spiritual medium that we all live in, that we all are awash in every moment of every day of every month of every year. And we're bringing that back into a conscious, on purpose agreement with the Spirit of God, rather than the spirit of whatever dark energies are being perpetrated and perpetuated around the world by these entities. So this is a historic event in all of mankind's history. This has been foretold by a number of religious worships and schools of thought. This has been foretold by a number of ancient tribal cultures and civilizations that had very advanced astronomy and mathematic capabilities. This is a liberation of not only mankind from bureaucratic and corporate tyranny, not only from election fraud and bioterrorism, but from the consciousness-based enslavement that has prevented true human progress and put us very far behind relative to what I would call other sentient beings out there that are amongst us in some capacity, but have been robbed of their right to have a relationship with us.
Yeah, I do believe my theory there is, SG, that, we were all knowing, at one time, you know what I mean? All knowledge, and we can tell this by looking back through history. And I do believe that we're going backwards in our physical and mental realm, our emotional state, to a place where we did have the knowledge and we were able to access the pineal gland. We were able to see things in the correct light. The problem is the evil forces, the cabal, whoever you want to call them, have reduced all this stuff from us, guys, and hidden history and taken everything from us. And now I do believe, we're going to go back in time to actually go forward in time. You understand what I'm saying there, SG?
Absolutely. It makes logical sense, and I think it almost bears concluding when we look at the ancient wonders of the world, such as the lighthouse at Alexandria, or the precision with which the Great Pyramids of Giza and others were built, that we had much more advanced capabilities, potentially more advanced technologies, certainly a greater understanding of consciousness, certainly a greater understanding of the spiritual identity of mankind in schools of ancient thought and in different civilizations that we have, pockmarked across this great earth over the last few thousands of years, and we're returning to a great expanded portion of that knowledge. I think within this awakening process, one of the things that is so sweetly ironic and poetic with this entire journey is that the opponents that we face have placed the entirety of their knowledge onto the worldwide internet because they are simply that arrogant. So the entirety of hidden records of mankind, the entirety to the greatest extent that we can, uncover of things like the scrolls of the Vatican tunnels and other things like that, they are kept within the worldwide internet. But most of it, of course, is being circulated through the deep and dark web. So by bringing that material upward and reintroducing that knowledge to the broadness of mankind, to the vast population majority of mankind, then an inevitability is sort of set into motion where a return to what that knowledge once brought to mankind is almost certain in that process. And we're in that process now. We're moving back towards a greater understanding of our spiritual relationship to ourselves, our spiritual relationships to one another, and our symbiotic balance of creation here in the world, what true environmentalism is supposed to be, what true amplification of sovereignty is supposed to be, what freedom of value exchange and commerce is supposed to look like and be like, in a much more in a much more modernized and intellectualized way, but with the wisdom that informed our ancients. That's a very powerful combination because it introduces the idea of cognitive rationale, intellect, the ability to reason things out with the right brain side of almost like that cosmic connection, that creative connection to inspiration itself, to what I would call the Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit within you, and being able to leverage both of those on purpose to bring to bear the work of your hands here in this world, I think would allow for world-changing events to come from nearly every one of us out there on this broadcast. You're talking about being backed up by the power that creates literal planets and worlds. So in this process, the return is a fantastic terminology for it. The realization, I think, is even just right in there with that, because you're talking about the activation of a level of knowledge that has been there intrinsically and intuitively in our human genome really since those days of old, but has been intentionally suppressed and kept from us. And with the cognitive realization that's spawning off in the world about the things that are happening and the things that are possible, those ancient wisdoms, that ancient intuitive knowledge that all of us possess about our relationship to the quantum world and our relationship to all that is and everything that is around us is activating as well. It's really a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and as we've seen a lot in the background, guys, and I just want to take you back to just one that happened. You know what I mean? And this is the sort of thing we're dealing with, evil itself. And this might lead SG into a conversation, I don't know, but let's just go back. On May the 2nd, 2018, acclaimed chef and Emmy Award-winning actor Anthony Bourdain posted a tweet. The tweet said, "Let's assume, for purposes of discussion, that HRC is Satan's consort and eats children and puppies whenever possible. In what way was Mike Cohen, the president fixer, not a problem?" Now, that was a tweet he put out. And he put that out on the 2nd of May, 2018, guys, and he passed away on June the 8th, 2018. A week later. This is what we're up against. This is true evil, guys, and this is what we're fighting. So there's going to be a lot more of that. There's been a lot more of that. We've seen the guy from Boeing that come out as a whistleblower. And, it just seems that, everyone that's game to come out with a bit of crucial information, if they can get to them, they will, SG. So, yeah, comments there, mate. Just something that's happening more, 15 or 30 odd of Hillary's friends that have all taken their own life. I don't know the number, but I know it's astronomical. But yeah, comments there on what we're going through and what's, where we are, SG. It's gonna continue to happen until we get a ramp on this. So, your comment.
I think my comment on that particular issue is that if they are able to get to them with the resources they have left, they certainly will. And we've seen that on display with the junior varsity level of terrorism, but terrorism nonetheless that has been unleashed just in the last 3 to 4 weeks. And President Trump has talked for a number of months now that a terrorist attack in the United States is 100% certain. And that is an event I think that we still have sort of yet to see, and we could see something like that on the 8th of April, just as a speculation there. But with regards to the discussion about Mr. Bourdain and the Boeing whistleblower and others, I'm not entirely convinced that Mr. Bourdain is actually truly deceased. And I know that that's crazy out there to say to the audience, and I know a lot of individuals have a hard time hearing something like that, but there are a number of people that had very advanced knowledge of the satanic ritualistic community in particular that entered into witness protection between 2014 and 2019. And basically that would have been the period of time prior to the launch of COVID-19, which has been, I think, a very large, broad-reaching military operation cover on top of itself being a military operation carried out by nefarious actors. So you're talking about, an act of world war. So with this process, to exactly what you just highlighted a moment ago, we are still up against an opponent. They do still have factions of influence, levers of power, and things that they can pull, but those factions are significantly less dangerous than they were even just a few years ago to we the people everywhere. That does not mean that they are devoid of danger. It simply means that we have a much better and more balanced game board by which to play. But if we don't get involved, if we're not actively on the ground doing the things that we need to do, applying pressure, sharing information, awakening our friends to the greatest degree possible, and where we can, exercising our own civic duty on the ground with our feet in the communities that we're in, then it's not necessarily a doomed situation, but it is a situation that will take much longer, right? I liken it to the sojourn in the desert with the Israelite people, because they were considerably hardened toward God in that period of time. It made for a much more difficult, much more long-term enduring journey than what was initially possible. And I don't think anything like that is present here, but the principle itself rings true no matter what. The more we focus collectively on the mission and the more that we get involved collectively, and sometimes we may have to draw upon our spiritual resources and reserves in order to do that. But the more we do so, the greater this process expands, and the more it encompasses on behalf of we the people and all of the different localities and municipalities that we're a part of. And it speeds the awakening itself worldwide, and this transition period that we're all living through up quite a bit.
Yeah, Twitter Spaces are now becoming the place of a flood of information. Elon's helped us out a hell of a lot there, whether it's Elon 126 or 95, I don't really care. But at the moment, Twitter's certainly doing us a favour out there, and we have some amazing spaces, which is actually bringing back a few of us space hosts. SG, we're getting back to trying to teach people the art of debate instead of them coming into rooms, you know what I mean, and going off their nut, you know what I mean, about this attitude and that attitude and my opinion's right. But we're actually, there's a few of us out there that are starting to get the debate back in and the pros and cons list. The thing, one of the things that's been taken away from us by the cabal, they don't want us debating stuff, the art of conversation's been removed. And this was right back in the 60s and 70s, guys, when they come up that you don't talk about politics and religion. Well, guess what? Stopping talking about politics and religion is why we're in the problem that we're in. One reason, not the main reason, but it is a helping reason, okay, to where we are now. And I think that we're now starting to get these conversations back, and I'm seeing a lot of like, you can't sit in some of these spaces. And it's like the police with my computers, you know what I mean? SG, if forensically they went through everything on my computer, how could these guys not get red pilled? How could they not, you know what I mean? Look in the guru's computer going, holy hell, he's got that. Wow. Oh, geez, he knows that. What? This stuff in the Philippines about, you know what I mean? What would they have been doing? So we know that we're getting these guys pilled up. And, I spoke to when they dropped the charges the other week, when we got up to court there, SG, and I had a conversation with the detectives, and their attitude was, listen, go out, because I'm going, listen, you guys, that you drop the charges, you're not going to stop me podcasting or doing this or doing that. What's the catch? You know what I mean? No catch. You can go and do whatever you want. You know what I mean? We're not. And, their attitude was, look, we know what you're saying and we know what's going on, but what are you going to do about it? You're not going to fix it. They're going to do it anyway. So this is the attitude of some of those people who may even be partly awake to what's going on, because they've been through my computers and they've had to go, holy hell, what the guru is up to here, you know what I mean? So yeah, we have got these people that are awake, but still this consciousness, and maybe I've got a question here, is this some of the effect of the jab, that these people just can see the information but just can't? Because I know these people would obviously be jabbed to be in the position they're in, you know what I mean, within the constabulary. So is this another part of the jab that comes in to work with the MK Ultra SG to keep these people from seeing, even though they see it, they don't see it, comment.
My comment, Guru, is on this particular issue, your intuitive senses are exactly right. Tucker Carlson just recently had an internationally recognized doctor of medicine from Germany and a multi-published researcher who came on to discuss a book, The Indoctrinated Brain, I believe is the name of the book. And within that discussion on Tucker's set, they got into the effects of the mRNA, the COVID vaccine, and just the general pandemic chain of events itself. And one of the things that is incredibly prevalent with the spike protein in the brain in human beings is that the spike protein itself, which if we remember back from the early days of the jab, is actually generated by the body as a result of the jab. spike protein itself attacks the hippocampus region in the brain, which is responsible for curiosity. It's also a region that is responsible, excuse me, for personal empowerment. It has a significant role to play in depression or non-depression in an emotionally balanced and healthy individual. So the idea that individuals that you described a moment ago would be suffering from some sort of brainwave cognitive dissonance or amplified level of apathy and complacency as a result of the jab is absolutely true. This is one of the purposes of the COVID vaccine itself, was to cause essentially a mass formation psychosis lethargy within the populations of the world, where they would simply accept totalitarian enslavement as the easier option, as the more convenient option, because it was more convenient in the mental spaces for people to be less active, right? It required less effort. It was less frightening. And these are things that would not normally be present in the human experience, except to say that we have lived through a couple of generations of very, very advanced military grade trauma-based programming, cognitive interruption programming that is purposed for exactly the reasons that we're talking about right now. And COVID was just the physiological extension of that very same program, or the COVID vaccine, excuse me, of that very same program. So, but at the same time, I want to highlight that the doctor on Tucker, and I've read a number of different pieces from various med heads around the world who I believe to be reputable, real experts, and none of them sound completely hopeless. They do draw a very serious picture, a very very serious portrait to be painted, but they also spend a great deal of time highlighting potential remedies and therapies, and highlighting how to re-engage cognition, how to re-engage curiosity, how to re-engage self-determination, the thrill of learning. And we all know out there, when we're learning about something that we're excited to learn about, it is exhilarating and thrilling. It's only when you're not wanting to be in class is school such a boring time, right? And so, in the period of time that we're living in, we are having to bring along a component of that jabbed population, because a significant component across partisan divides, and it's worth noting that across partisan divides plays a big part of this. In all of the Commonwealth and Western world nations, a big component of those populations went and took these jabs, whether it was from pressure, whether it was from mind control, whether it was from a fear trauma response, whether it was, mass social conformity, whatever the reason may have been. Individuals, again, across all lines of all ideological positions took these jabs. And we need a significant component of that population, painful though it may be, to wake up to what has occurred, so that they can help bring to bear solutions for humanity, and certainly awareness and context and depth to the discussion of what biological criminality against humanity actually was.
Yeah. All right. And then we've got, to go on top of that, we've got this this poison in their system, and then we've got the 5G, what I mean, out there. So is the 5G going to come down? Because without the 5G, which obviously, I'll say again, people, is a military grade weapon, okay, without the 5G, their technologies are sort of rendered a little bit useless. Would you agree, SG? So are we looking at getting rid of the 5G, the component that can initiate this stuff? Is that a worldwide trend? We've heard that in America, I've heard rumors that the 5G has been taken down. I don't know whether that's true or not. I can't vet it. But are we looking at getting rid of this 5G, or are we looking at, turning this 5G into something that can be useful? What's your view on that, SG?
My view on the 5G is yes and yes to both questions, actually. I have visual confirmation in my area of the woods, for example, here in the USA, that 5G is alive and well in certain communities. And I also have visual confirmation not that far from me that in other communities, local city councils and county commissions here in the United States, what you would call very localized municipal governments, have actually voted to outlaw 5G within the borders of the county. And so you've seen towers, actually repurposed and removed, or the equipment pulled down and trucked away somewhere as a result of some of these actions. So it's pockmarked, I think, in that regards, and it's likely that pattern would be extrapolated to the rest of the world. It is possible, and I want to highlight for patriots out there, just so that they understand this, to turn 5G into an asset for us rather than a weapon against us. As a matter of fact, a great deal of the technology out there that these secret space programs have been developing and researching for a very long time has the capability to be excessively good for humanity, to really provide a major leap in the standard of living and the quality of life worldwide if properly oversighted and properly deployed and regulated by we the people and not a vast government bureaucracy. 5G is one of those technologies, of course, and what makes 5G so dangerous is that 5G is a powerful amplitude that penetrates all the way to the red blood cells within the bloodstream of the human body, and it can bathe the human body in a penetrative radiation energy 24 hours a day, depending on the intensity of the tower, right, and of course your geographic proximity to it. But the tower itself is a transmission device that can be tuned to any particular frequency. You could transmit a very intense frequency of love. 528 hertz, I believe, is the frequency of that, or 432. And you could transmit solfeggio frequencies in a cascading format on a repetitive cycle, right? And you could provide levels of cellular healing direct to the cells of individuals that have been jabbed and those individuals that remain unjabbed, to generate and stimulate natural DNA healing and natural fragmentation reconciliation, which is, I think, what that process is called. So, with the 5G situation, the question then becomes, well, who's in control of it? And again, I think that answer, much like I would answer the question with chemtrails, is that you have a mixture of good and bad. Within the United States military, there has been a background espionage, almost like a counterinsurgency operation running within the ranks of command and control and U.S. military brass that we can trace back to as early as 2016. And that process has yielded a tremendous amount of progress, but they're, the largest force of the U.S. military itself. It takes a long time to conduct a special operation of that nature and isolate all of your targets. And I would say that the same is true likely in, Western world militaries like the Australian military, the New Zealand military, and others. So if that is the case, then it's likely we have a checkerboard, some sort of checkered pattern out there in the world of control of patriotic actors in localities and administrative zones, and control of bureaucratic dark hat actors, or simply apathetic actors like the agents you described just a moment ago, who are perfectly willing to press play on an agenda that harms their fellow man as long as it allows them to put bread and milk on the table. And so I think the repurposing of that has to come in a way that's sort of appropriate with the justice, and the justice, I think, cannot be initiated until we get the vast majority of the public and the population aware as to what the nature of these things really is, and also what they can be if given proper reinforcement.
Okay, thank you. I'm in agreement with your comments there. Yeah, it can be used either way, but at the moment it is a weapon. And when I put meters on out here, guys, it's just, that's what I mean. Up in the middle of the cities and that, it's just incredible. America must be the same. So there's just frequency waves absolutely everywhere. Okay, we're getting close to the end. SG, what do you think about, Russia and America's alliance with Xi, with North Korea, and do you foresee anything that you could maybe let the people know that you think is going to happen, with this alliance? Any funny little things you can see? They're all coming together to do stuff. Obviously, we know that they're working individually in the background. We've also got, the United Arab Emirates and their king. How far? When you see these guys, everything's building up. These guys have got to get into the place soon where they go checkmate. You know what I mean? And the heat's on then, don't forget. You know what I mean? These guys don't like to go down, but the checkmate point's got to be getting close. I'm not asking for a time, but these people are all in the background. They've all been doing their own stuff. I just do believe that it'll be these major entities that actually, Russia's got to, sort out its part, which it's doing. NATO is starting to fall apart. We can see that Ukraine funding and everything is now coming an absolute joke. We have the most woke person put into the governor generalship over here in Australia, and it's been a cricket pick, a captain's pick from the Prime Minister. I'll just pick the leftist, wokest person I can find. So, what do you see? These alliance countries, those four or five especially. We know we've got an alliance of military in the background, but these big players that are in the forefront, what do you see?
As it pertains specifically to the Russia, China, USA triad to, sort of save the world, that being the main command structure to give, substance and underpinning to this worldwide operation that we're all living through, I would say that you're going to see those main actors antagonistically positioned against one another until the entire system fails. And I think one of the reasons that President Trump met with specifically the presidents, President Xi and President Putin of China and of, Russia, respectively, is that he wanted to convey and strategize a way that this process could play out and not bring mass casualty events to any of our nations in that journey. Now, again, that's speculation. I can't purport to know exactly what was discussed. I'm sure an array of topics was discussed and brought up at both meetings over the course of many days. But I would submit to anyone that militarized and diplomatic cooperation at a point in time, likely at a precipice point in time where World War III could be right up on us, I think that was the main, or one of the main focuses of those meetings. So here we are at this particular point in time, and by virtue of those powers being antagonistically positioned against one another, what do we have? We have the paralysis and the de-dollarization of the U.S. dollar and the serpent dollar system worldwide. We have the liberation of the African continent and the support structures being essentially replaced in the African continent for things like grain, monetary provision, medicine, etc., coming from other global South actors and Russia as a main grain supplier. We're seeing the Arabic powers in the Middle East given a much more militarized balance of forces, a much higher balancing of the scales relative to the NATO presence in the Middle East through Turkey and the Israeli Mossad intelligence community and their highly weaponized capabilities there in the Eastern Mediterranean. So what we've seen is we haven't even talked about the exposure of bioterrorism, the implosion of bureaucratic relations across different nation states, the resource lines that have been cut off, the projects that had been, forced into the future potentially indefinitely regarding DEI and the climate agenda. All of these things as a result of primarily the behavior of those three world powers that you just cited a moment ago, and also the behavior of aligned regional bloc interests. And North Korea is a fascinating one to add to the mix because North Korea was the largest money laundering dark money pool that existed on planet Earth because no access outside was able to come within. The Kim dynasty was heavily involved in the satanic scene, heavily beholden to the central banking cabal in the background. There was a lot of brutality that went on, in the subjugation of the North Korean dynasties and the North Korean people. And so now we have Kim with his strings cut. Q literally tells us online that the strings were cut from this particular entity. And so we have an expansion of capability that stands to bring a wild card, almost like a trump card or an ace card or a joker card to the table. And something like that could be a ballistic missile attack on the United States of America. It's likely that Russia and China would saber rattle very loudly about doing something like that, but would likely not engage in that process. But North Korea could be the wild card, and Kim Jong-un would have the international street cred, if we want to call it that, the international reputation alignment, and be in a unique position, I think, to not have to worry about what worldwide refutation would come his way as a result of such an action. And I think it's very possible that we see that set off an unprecedented sequence of events militarily here in the United States of America, potentially even something like, an air raid warning and an actual national emergency as a result of this. And Q talks about missiles quite a bit online and how missiles are used spontaneously to disrupt the flow of events, if we want to call it that. And if we think back to 9/11/01, for example, a missile was launched from within the domestic United States within a waterway, I believe it was the Potomac River, that actually hit the Office of Naval Intelligence at the Pentagon. It was not a plane, it was a missile. And a missile was also shot at Air Force One with President Trump aboard sometime in 2017. So, these particular events and North Korea's potential role in these events pertaining to, all of the different junction nodes on this journey, if we want to call it that. I think that they're a wild card that is going to be very important actually going forward. Perhaps not for glory and honor in the sense of world history, but more for their willingness to step up and do something sort of so crazy and so belligerent against the deep state industrial complex that they're simply not able to respond effectively and capably and maintain their grip on power. Now, again, some of this, and in fact, a great deal of this is speculative in nature, and it's worth the audience keeping that in mind. But we also have patterns which are worthy of noting, and President Trump has talked a lot about Kim and Kim Jong-un. President Trump has also said glowing things about Putin and Xi just in the last 12 months. So something is coming as it pertains to these geopolitical events and all of these specific nations involved. And whatever that something is, I think will be very crucial for the rest of our journey.
Well, let's hope that this journey is not too much longer, but we know it is. We know we've got a little bit of work in front of us to do yet, SG. No one's kidding themselves, mate. Do we get it back? Yeah, of course we get it back. But yeah, we were told to endure and overcome, and that's what we need to do, guys. That's what this is all about. You know, whatever comes up in the next couple of months, you know, or whatever it is between now and as the heat comes on, I'm very interested to see what happens in the next couple of days. But I'm not worried about anything. I do have a fear not a fear, maybe a worry for the American people that the deep state would like to pull something on this eclipse. I hope it's a really cloudy day and no one turns up. That'd be a great thing. A really cloudy night or day or whatever it is. Yeah, and there's nothing there to see, SG. You know, that would play well into my hands for what's going on at the moment. But look, all in all, we've got a few other things here, but you know, we've got
Julian Assange.
Julian Assange, you know, people are wondering what's happening with Julie, and there's a lot of stuff. You know, what is he in the big picture of all this? SG, have you got a comment on that? You know, we've heard a lot of different things. If you can go out and see a lot of different people on the net that have done what looks like decent research and decent stuff on, you know, things not adding up all the way around Julian Assange. I'm not going to say too much, but yeah, what's your view on Julian? And, you know, will we ever get him out, or are they just a distraction playing us against SG?
You know, as crazy as this sounds, Guru, and my heart goes out to Julian Assange for what he has endured. I can't imagine. But I have all the respect and admiration in the world for the man, quite frankly, because he was one of the very first true journalistic personalities to break the entirety of the truth to the world. And he was not willing to, you know, stand behind the face-saving, manipulative gestures that so many of the entities that purport to share information, you know, even now in many spaces seem to exhibit. So that being said, I'm not convinced in some regards that the prison situation that he has been in, while remarkably painful and extraordinarily unjust, may have provided for some element of protection for Mr. Assange that would not have been available to him outside of that particular arena. We have seen, and certainly in recent days we can confirm this, the intelligence community sort of worldwide, especially in the Western world, sort of losing its mind, you know, desperation and panic moves that are now being set off in such obvious fashion and with such veracity and, you know, brutality and cruelty, that retaliation against Mr. Assange in particular, I don't think that would be off the table at all. As a matter of fact, I think that would be one of the top 5 issues for those agencies to try and make happen. You know, Mr. Assange holds the key to a great deal of the U.S. Washington, D.C. corruption. Mr. Assange is on record saying that 98% of your governments worldwide are corrupt to the very core. You know, Mr. Assange is aware that war is a perpetual money laundering operation which moves the wealth of the working class out of the working class and back into the hands of a transnational corporate elite. And this is an individual who was, you know, not willing to compromise U.S. national security and actually withheld a great deal of the reporting that he already had, a great deal of the things that he attained in the WikiLeaks hacks and in other journalistic fashions for that exact purpose. And yet we have seen such interest, right, being taken from the intelligence deep state community in getting at Mr. Assange. So the question is, what about him and where do we go from here? I would say that if I were to speculate, and it would just be speculation, this particular component of whatever espionage war is waging out there in the world is beyond my pay grade to comment on effectively. But in speculation and hypothesis, I could see and envision a scenario where Mr. Assange is actually extradited to the USA under a Trump administration and promised safety, potentially political asylum or amnesty, and allowed to tell his true story and allowed to inform the public to a great degree of the things that he has unearthed and that he has witnessed, and that he can bring some sort of documented proof to. And we know a great deal of that, of course, involves the CIA, the DNC, Hillary Clinton, for example, and others. And he is the type of person, based on Tucker's short interview. It wasn't an interview at all, really. It was more of a commentary that Tucker was able to do after having visited Mr. Assange in Belmarsh prison, where he said that he really enjoyed embarrassing Hillary Clinton publicly in front of the world. So this would be, I think, poetic justice in a way for Mr. Assange that he very much deserves, and he's a hero out there for the Great Awakening.
Yeah, I think everyone's prayers are with him, and he's just like the political football that just gets kicked around. It's not right, and yeah, something needs to be done about it. Right, digital ID in USA, how's it going over there? Just quickly, because they're ramping it in over here. You know, they just passed a bill that no one wanted and no one voted on, and you know that we weren't even allowed to have discussion on it within the Parliament. Just push it through. Our digital ID, you know, it's not mandatory. We're not, pushing it in on you, but yeah, without it, you won't be able to wipe your ass or buy toilet paper. So, yeah, how's it going over there in America? Are they pulling the same thing, or they're not as hectic on it at this present time? As a couple of people would like to know.
The pursuit for a digital footprint is progressing forward over here in the same way I think that it's progressing forward worldwide in the NATO Western world. And I think it's going to continue that progression until we see these extraordinary and unprecedented events that effectively pause our societies. We're being asked to endure a lot as other relevant operations around the world proceed forward. We have needed to provide security nets for a lot of the third world countries who are only third world because of the financial manipulation of the NATO West, right? And the involvement of the pre- and post-colonial financial landscapes essentially being, back to the same concentrated beast, but just in a different administrative fashion at the ground level. So in that process, we're seeing the perpetuation, I think, and I think in some regards it's aimless, but it still has gasoline, right? It still has the engine moving the vehicle forward. We're seeing the advancement of some of these, what we would call NWO style agendas. And those agendas, I think, are serving us a great opportunity to red pill and awaken those amongst us who would not red pill and awaken when we first approached them about things like the vaccine, the big pharma campaigns, the election fraud, but who have since become much more primed to suspect nefariousness in the system just based on what seems to be, an expansion of systemic corruption, right, to a great expansion, to a very great level, and the sheer chaos that has broken out worldwide as a result of the things that have happened within, the United States and the rest of, the Western world post 2020. So that is not to, highlight a situation for folks out there that doesn't have, that is devoid of hope of some fashion. Not at all. It is to say that we are being asked to endure a lot. I think in some regards, perhaps it may not be exactly fair, but it is our mantle in this particular awakening as we move forward. And we are being asked to shoulder that because there are significant progressions that are contributing towards worldwide balance, worldwide fairness in value exchange, fairness in international relations that are progressing, as quickly as they can, but they are simply not there yet. We still have some of the Pacific theater community to drag out as far as the military-industrial complex, certainly the bioterrorism complex in Taiwan. We're witnessing the destruction of tunnel systems in northwest and north central Mexico, just south of the U.S. southern border, and those operations don't seem to be concluded yet, just based on the activity of press releases from outlets in those regions. And so as we go through this process, and the digital ID and the whole push towards a digital centralized system, et cetera, being a part of that process, I think it's possible that we plan to simply repurpose a great deal of that infrastructure as well. Not unlike things like AI, we can utilize a digital ID system is not really the right way to put it, and I don't think a lot of patriots would go for that, but a more digitally enhanced way of interacting, say economically with the market, or with commercially with the market, would do us a great sense of convenience if it were encrypted and secured in a way that it could not be nefariously manipulated against us. AI is another example of the same type of tool that, if given proper coding and programming and allowed simple machine learning instructions and simple machine learning capabilities, rather than attempting to merge it with consciousness right out of the gate, we could have something that could provide a great deal of a convenience, a leap again in the quality of life and the standard of living for patriots out there. So, the digital system, I think, is one that we're being asked to, sort of put up with for the time being, and put a pin in it to come back to and address this later, because we are disconnecting, very, very important component areas of the world along in this journey, and we're just not to a completed a completed part of that journey, I don't think, yet, Guru.
Yeah, no, I would sort of agree with you there. We've got to utilize what we've got to get to ourselves to a place, and we just got to ride the wave, like I've said before, SG, with obviously, putting pressure back on the wave as well, not just, riding it and doing nothing, but actually trying to rip it apart on the way into the beach, so that is what we're trying to do. But look, another great discussion. Is there any topic you'd like to close on, SG, and your final remarks, mate? Thanks to everyone for your questions. I hope I've covered most of them. One quick one is, are the USA highways, are they getting closed? Whether you want to look at that, SG. That's just another one last question I had here. But if you'd like to go into any you'd like, mate, and wrap up, and then we've got a song that everyone knows here to finish the clip. And I'd like to just advise everyone that stoptherot.org is available to everyone around the world. It is a website. You can go there. You can find out what is happening in Australia, latest news. You can have a look at our Australian bloods. There's not one blood that we have tested in Australia here under live blood that is not in some way contaminated, guys. So you can have a look at that information. But I would like everyone to, if you're international viewers, etc., get on over, stoptherot.org, and you will find out exactly what's going on in Australia. So thanks, SG. Closing remarks, my friend.
My closing remarks, I think, and regarding the highway question, yes, we have seen some highway closures, and we have seen some, other events with highways, even since the Port of Baltimore incident on 326. And it sort of serves to, underpin and provide some substance to the entirety of the conversation we've had today, which is, there are extraordinary events on the road, metaphorically, on the highway, if I can keep with the pun, in front of us, that are going to be, I think, eye-opening for even the most dead-asleep normie, and will be both very exhilarating and even a little concerning to patriots out there that have been preparing for these events for a while. Again, and I don't want to overstate the issue, but it is worth noting that when whistleblower documents are being sent out to various podcasters, and I was not the only one on the thread where these documents were actually funneled to. There were others out there that these documents were funneled to that I'm not allowed to say on air. But these documents confirm the presence of an extraordinary domestic operation happening militarily here in the United States of America. It is absolutely a reconnaissance and mapping operation. It's a training and protection operation. The documents confirm that it is live action, that it is real time. So whatever is happening, in the world is as a result of a severe destabilization that was never anticipated by the enemies that we face, never anticipated by the useful idiot mules in all levels of government in our localities everywhere, who thought themselves sort of perpetually aristocratic because of their position of ingratiation with financial and corporate interests, and even intelligence community and militarized interests, over and above we the people. And so this destabilization has caused incredible and disastrous results as a result of the entirety of the consciousness aligning rather than fracturing, and the attempt with COVID-19 was to fracture humanity, and to some degree that was true and that was effective. But the congealment that we have seen as a cohesive humanity, as one civilization moving forward as a result of that, was never anticipated before, and that sort of dovetails right along with that kinetic destabilization operation that's running here in the U.S., and I'm certain it's running in other NATO and Western world nations, including Australia, including Germany, and including the United Kingdom. So whatever events happen, from here on out, I think that one of the things we have to acknowledge more than anything is that we would not be experiencing the type of desperation, the type of obvious miscalculation of moves, misdeployment of resources, and misuse of positions of power in the fashions that we have, if these individuals did not think that there was truly something to be afraid of. And I choose to smile at that every single day, because if I can look in the mirror and feel secure and protected by the Spirit of God that stands behind me, and for the first time ever, they are staring in the mirror in the morning and find themselves afraid, I consider that a righting of the balance in the world, and we are well on the way to seeing that publicly.
Well, a lot of them have been called out, SG. A lot of the truthers that are making money and doing this and doing that have been called. And guess what? You're not one of them, brother. And we knew that. You know what I mean? I got a lot of faith in you, SG, in what you do and the amount of work that you put in. And our families and that come into this. We make a lot of sacrifices to do what we do, SG, and I just want to thank you for them again. Because it is, mate. It's pretty hard work actually trying to run. Not running anything. Actually, why do I put out a news show? Trying to get people aware of what's going on and spending our time doing the research. Pondering the different possibilities that could come to try and give people the most educated guidance you could give them in our position. So again, they've all been called out. You weren't one of them. Bless you, brother. Thanks for being you, and thanks for being honest and just bringing what you know. And what you know is a great research area, SG, and it's quite wide. And I really enjoy talking to you. So thank you very much again. God bless to your family and everything that's going on over there. God bless to the Americans. And we'll go out with a song from America that I'm sure everyone knows. So again, thanks, SG. Love you, brother.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, my friend. God bless.
Old dogs and the good Lord, they'd have me strung up in the psych ward, 'cause every day living in this new world is one too many days to me. Son, we're on the brink of the next world war, and I don't think nobody's praying no more, and I ain't saying I know it for sure. I'm just down on my knees begging the Lord, take me home. I wanna go home. I don't know which road to go. It's been so long. I just know I didn't used to wake up feeling this way, cussing myself every damn day. There's always some kind of bill to pay. People just doing what the rich man say. I wanna go home. Now 4 generations farming the ground. Grandson sells it to a man out of town, and 2 weeks later, the trees go down. Only got concrete growing around. I wanna go home. I wanna go home. I don't know which road to go. It's been so long. I just know I didn't used to wake up feeling this way, cussing myself every damn day. People have really gone and lost their way. They all just do what the TV say. I wanna go home. If it weren't for my old dogs and the good Lord, they'd have me strung up in the psych ward.
Good evening, folks. I hope you have enjoyed the show, or not a show, but the facts and what's gone on, guys. Let's go get them, people. Let's go. Oh, it's go time, and I'm not supposed to be on screen.